Only in Newsday, two Long Island brothers who came to the U.S. as kids, deported by ICE to a country they hardly know. Plus, the latest on more possible snow and the return of the bitter cold. I'm Macy Egland. More on that in a moment. But first, a sea of blue will say goodbye today to a Nassau police officer killed on her way to work. A funeral is being held this morning for Officer Espinosa. Nassau and Suffolk officers, as well as police from the NYPD and MTA, attended her wake in St. James yesterday. The 42-year-old was killed over the weekend. Police say Matthew Smith was drunk when he ran a red light in Smithtown and hit her car. Espinosa leaves behind a husband and 18-month-old daughter. Only a Newsday, two brothers living on Long Island were deported back to their native El Salvador. Josue and Jose Trijo Lopez came to the U.S. 10 years ago after their mother got extortion threats from a gang member.
Y también por la extorsión que yo tuve, que empezaron a pedirme cantidades de dinero grande, que si yo no las tenía, pues ellos se iban a dirigir con mis hijos.
The family first settled in Georgia before moving to the island. Despite having no criminal convictions, the brothers were detained last May when they showed up for a routine immigration check-in. Later in the show, the legal fight they face trying to get back to the U.S. This Bronx man is accused of sex trafficking on Long Island. Police say Eric Acevedo brought women to the Roadway Inn in Huntington Station for sex work. They believe this was part of a trafficking ring that brought victims into Suffolk over the past 3 years and has ties to Brazil and the Dominican Republic. A Newsday found dozens of Long Island's hotels and motels are serving as hubs for sex traffickers. Read more about our in-depth investigation, Unprotected, on Newsday.com. Lawmakers have okayed the state's controversial aid in dying law, clearing the way for the governor's signature. That bill allows terminally ill adults to die on their own terms. Supporters call it a victory for the dying. Opponents say it's physician-assisted suicide. Big upgrades are planned for parks across the town of Smithtown. $7.7 million will help improve Sweetbriar Nature Center, Hoyt Farm Nature Preserve, and Armory Park. Armory Park will get a new pickleball court and new lights at the football field. That work begins next month. All right, let's talk about your Thursday weather now. We are bracing for more possible snow and the return of that bitter cold. We've got meteorologist Jeff Banson back with us to break this all down for us, Jeff.
Never a good thing at the top of the show where we're showing you those negative 10s, negative 15s.
It's been rough.
It's been a nice little break this week, I will say that. We've had a little bit of snow melt, not a ton of snow melt, but little by little here we go. You also have to be very careful because you see that little trickle out from the snow piles. It refreezes at night. So every morning we have that risk for black ice, and hopefully it'll go away soon. But again, going to be a little bit longer than it is sooner, I would say. Here's your weather headlines. More sun and tolerable cold. We're calling it tolerable cold. It's not the stuff that we had last week, but again, that's coming back into play by the weekend. We are also talking about some light snow. Very likely at this point that we'll see, I'd say about an inch or two across the island. And then behind that storm system comes in the bitter cold. So we're talking temperatures today getting up to right around 30 degrees. We've been flirting with the freezing mark over the last couple of days. How far we've fallen, where that is just such an impressive milestone. You know, we're still, even at best, have been about 5 degrees below average these past couple of days here. Looking at the temperatures today, yeah, right on the doorstep of that, but at least we're into the 30s decade here, not the 20s and the teens. So take a look outside. It's quiet, very quiet. It's been a quiet week. We've had plenty of sun along the way. Couple of different storms we're tracking right now. One developing along the Carolinas, much like the close call nor'easter that we had last weekend that just passed offshore. This one's going to be even more so well offshore. And then we're tracking a clipper over the Great Lakes. This is what's going to bring us our light snow. Good thing these two didn't come together a little bit better, because that could have made a big coastal storm. As you can see, it really blows off shore there. The clipper comes in. Now, clippers are notorious for not bringing us a ton of snow. Generally, 1 to 3 inches is the best that they can output. There is a little interesting thing that happens with this, though. We have sort of a trough that forms. Call this an inverted trough. And what this does, it creates this skinny little line of some heavier snow showers, these little bands here. All indications are that this pushes east of Long Island as it does try to form here. And you can see another developing wave of low pressure right offshore. If this were to creep a little bit further west, we could be talking maybe a couple of more locally higher amounts. Right now, though, just generally up to 2 inches Friday night into Saturday. So this is a minor snow event, but again, it paves the way for another blast of Arctic air. Take a look at these temperatures, and they are not pretty, folks. As we head into Saturday night, we're already feeling like 10 below. I would think another cold weather advisory, just like last week, is going to be issued once again for the island as we get a little bit closer here. Now, these numbers may be a little padded, but I mean, just in the ballpark, you're talking about frigid air, dangerously cold temperatures, which will be around 0 degrees on Sunday morning. Today, a high of 30 again across the island. We should be into the low 30s for most spots. Going down into the teens tonight, 19 with just a few clouds. It will be a cloudier day coming up on Friday. As we take a look, let's see if we can get the 7-day up. There it is. Cloudy skies for your Friday. Saturday, light snow. We should be quiet for Super Bowl Sunday, but again, frigid out there. A high of 17, lows in the single digits to near 0. Temperatures, though, do moderate a little quicker this time as we head into next week. You should be back above freezing by the time we get to Wednesday. Again, baby steps, whatever we can do.
Long Island weather is brought to you by PTRC.
2 brothers were brought to the U.S. from El Salvador as kids and grew up in Georgia. Years later, they moved to Long Island in hopes of finding work. But months ago, they were deported by ICE during a routine check-in and sent back to the country they hardly know. ICE just deported these 2 brothers from Long Island. So Newsday got on a plane.
We have arrived in El Salvador.
And started banging on doors in El Salvador, all to find out what happened. So, what happened? Well, we should probably start at the beginning. It's 2016. El Salvador is overrun with gang violence. And according to statistics, there is more than 5,000 murders per year. To put that in perspective, that's roughly 14 murders a day, or a murder roughly every 2 hours. It's really bad. So their mother decided to pack up her sons, who were then 10 and 11 years old, and flee to America. And where there's gangs, there's extortion.
Y también por la extorsión que yo tuve, que empezaron a pedirme cantidades de dinero grandes que si yo no las tenía, pues ellos se iban a dirigir con mis hijos.
Now once here, she settled in Georgia and applied for asylum while the boys began their American upbringing. Jose joined Future Farmers of America with dreams of becoming a mechanic and preacher since he went to church several times a week. And Josue joined JROTC with his sights on joining the Air Force to serve the United States. They were pursuing their American dreams. Joining me now to talk more about this is Newsday reporter David Olson, Melanie Krebs, Executive Director of Immigrant Services Organization Carecen, and former immigration judge Andrew Arthur. David, we start with you. We heard about it in the piece, but can you tell us more about the brothers' arrest last year?
So the brothers arrived with their mother. They crossed the border into Texas in 2016. A few months later, they applied for asylum. They lost 2 cases, and they appealed, and then the Board of Immigration Appeals rejected that last request. So they were subject to what's called a final order of removal. Mm-hmm. And so, but what had been the case, especially in the past, is that as long as they didn't have a criminal record, oftentimes immigrants were, even despite having a final order of removal, were allowed to stay in the United States as long as they checked in with ICE. And so in March of last year, they went to one of their regular check-ins in Manhattan, and they were arrested. And then in May, they were deported to El Salvador.
So, Melanie, the brothers' deportation is part of a larger crackdown going on by the Trump administration. Could you talk about what's happening here on Long Island?
Yeah, Ken, we're seeing stories like this, many stories like this is happening all around Long Island. You know, Nassau and Suffolk County has been a targeted area by ICE recently. And among the advocacy groups that we're part of, that Carecen is part of, we're seeing ICE activity multiple times a day, pretty much for the past year. And so a lot of stories like Jose and Josue's.
What kind of changes are you seeing in the community because of this?
There is immense fear, obviously. I mean, I think terror is an appropriate word at this point for most people who, of course, people who are people of color, who have an accent. Terror is an appropriate word to use. School attendance is down by immigrant kids, of course. Parents are afraid to drop off their kids. Kids are afraid to go, not sure, whether a parent will be there when they get home. Parents are afraid to go to the grocery store. The fear is really, really heightened, and we're seeing withdrawal from everyday life, and that's affecting, of course, family stability and family health.
Now, Andrew, I want to bring you in. The Trejo Lopez brothers had something called final orders of removal. Could you explain what that means?
Sure, Ken. A final order of removal is an order that's issued either by an immigration judge or by the Board of Immigration Appeals, assuming that there is no petition for review filed with one of the federal circuit courts. And what that document represents is that an individual has been found to be removable from the United States. They've received due process. They've been allowed to apply for any forms of protection that might allow them to remain in the United States. And yet they've been found to be deportable and therefore subject to deportation from this country.
Is this something that you've been seeing more frequently?
Final orders of removal? Actually not. It's probably the most common thing that I've seen in my 34-year career in immigration. In fact, I've issued thousands of them. But with respect to the arrests of individuals who are under final orders of removal, it is different than under the Biden administration. In fact, one of the biggest issues with the Biden administration with respect to immigration enforcement was their failure to actually execute those orders of removal. Consequently, by November of 2024, more than 1.4 million individual orders of removal remained in the United States that were unexecuted. That's a huge population of people who are living in the United States under final orders of removal and yet not removed. So, from that perspective, it's different from the Biden administration, but not that different from the George W. Bush administration, the Clinton administration, and the Obama administration, all of which I served.
Now, David, ICE responded about that final order of removal. So what did they have to say?
So ICE said in part, once they've exhausted all due process and appeals, the aliens remain subject to a final order of removal from an immigration judge, and ICE must carry out that order. And what ICE was referring to is what we had talked about earlier, how they had lost 2 cases, appealed, lost that time, and then got their final order of removal. So ICE's argument is they have had due process.
Okay, and Andrew, records show the brothers have never been arrested, but you say people without criminal records should not automatically be spared from deportation. Why is that?
Well, yeah, that's actually a great question. The Immigration and Nationality Act, the fundamental law that governs immigration in this country, states that at the time that an individual receives a final order of removal, DHS is under an obligation to take them into removal and detain them for at least 90 days or until they're physically deported from the United States. And that's not some dusty relic of, some ancient law. When Congress passed the Lake and Riley Act in June of 2025, or in January of 2025, last January, it actually authorized state attorneys general to sue the Department of Homeland Security if it failed to take those individuals into custody and physically remove them from the United States. So, this is a statutory obligation that's always been imposed on the department, but one that Congress has doubled down on and, has directed the department to fulfill.
Melanie, how do you respond to that?
The way I see it right now is, as a nation, we need to think through our moral obligation. We need to think through our moral obligation to those who are being picked up currently, to those who have been living in our country and, have no criminal record, have proven that they want to live in our country in a way that would, be civically engaged. One of the brothers here wants to go into the Air Force. Their kids who are serving in their church. These are not threats to our community, and so I think we need to think through what our moral obligation as a nation is. And it makes me think of the Refugee Act of 1980, which was a response to the ship, the St. Louis, that had arrived from Europe with Jews on it during World War II that we sent back, and many of those Jews then perished because we did not allow them to come in. So our response was changing our refugee acceptance. And so that Refugee Act in 1980 was a response to that because of our moral failure. And we need to think right now, are we again repeating history? Are we failing morally those who are here among us, not a threat to us? They came seeking peace, seeking hope, and are we failing them by sending back kids like Jose and Josue?
Do you feel like times now there is more tension between morality and law?
I do think that there's tension between that because I think that, we can parse out details. I know that there's details in Jose and Josue's case that can argue why they should have gone back. But if we look at the morality of it, we're all reading these kids' stories and we're saying there's no reason why they should be there. They have no family there. They have no future there. Their future and their family is here. So there is a tension there to say there has to be a way to justify the fact that although maybe when they came, by the letter of the law, it didn't justify them staying. We have to find a way around that because we have a morality to these kids and to so many others like them.
With that said, David, is there any chance of Jose and Josue coming back to the U.S.?
There is. Their lawyer is pursuing multiple legal maneuvers or avenues, but even she acknowledges it's an uphill battle.
Did she say that all the maneuvers that she's exploring are just coming to fruition, or is she trying to go back on things they've tried in the past?
One was a motion to reopen the case that was just denied on January 16th, and then the plan is now to appeal before a circuit court in Georgia. The other part of this is that before their arrest, she had pursued an avenue through a family court judge in Suffolk County, which ruled after their arrest that they should not be removed. And basically, the way the system works is that ruling is then sent to U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, which was considering something called Special Immigrant Juvenile Visa, which is for people who were at the time of the filing under 21, and they need a ruling from a family court judge before they make it. The U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services makes a ruling. So they finally, in August, after their deportation, they're not eligible for that visa because they had already left the country. And then their lawyer says, well, they left the country because they were deported, and they failed to rule on this before their deportation. So that avenue she's still pursuing, but that's more difficult because they're no longer in the country.
So it's safe to say the attorney is trying not only new ways, but trying to change old ways that they've tried in the past with a different attorney.
Right, it's a combination. And basically her argument on reopening the case is that the previous attorney in Georgia had not pursued that special immigrant juvenile visa. And that's one of the arguments for reopening the case. But again, that was rejected on January 16th, although it's being appealed.
Okay, a lot of moving parts. Well, we will be following this story closely, of course, bringing you any developments on the Trejo Lopez brothers case. My thanks to David Olson, Melanie Krebs, and of course, Andrew Arthur. And you can read more about this story at Newsday.com. Thank you so much for watching.
Time now for the best in high school sports. Here's Jared Veluzzi.
It was another terrific week of high school sports here on Long Island, featuring some amazing plays and some of the craziest that we've seen all year. We'll start off in Valley Stream Central, where Sean O'Neill will launch it down court and sinks it. He went on to have 51 points in their victory over Cold Spring Harbor. And we'll head out to Suffolk County. Copeg taking on Ward Melville. Devin Barnes with the block here. They go down the court, and Aiden Boswell the fadeaway buzzer at the end of the first quarter. And in girls hoops, it's the same exact two teams. Jenna Greek's three-pointer will give Ward Melville the lead for good. And Half Hollow Hills West, Amaya Burke, the contact won't matter. She connects from downtown. And in ice hockey now, Plainview's Ryan Silver makes one stop, he'll make another as Plainview advances in the playoffs. And And Half Hollow Hills taking on Manhasset. Hills, they're shorthanded. Jonathan Wheeler, he's going to go coast to coast. You see the wheels, now you see the shot. He has 4 goals as Half Hollow Hills gets the victory. And in the girls wrestling championships in Nassau County, Beth Page's Gabrielle Severn, you saw the takedown earlier, and she's going to handle this in just 17 seconds as she'll collect the 120-pound crown in Nassau girls wrestling. And in the same exact event, Hicksville's Haley Gonzalez, this one right here is going to have the crowd erupt as she would go on to get the win by tech fall 11-0 for the 132-pound title. As those were the plays of the week all over Long Island, playoffs starting to ramp up here, and I'll be back next week with some more phenomenal plays.
Looking forward to it, and you can watch the entire Sarah Sounds Off episode on Newsday.com. This week, Greg checks in with the undefeated Northport girls basketball team. Click Get More below that Newsday TV video box. Here's what's up on Long Island. It's a celebration of all things winter in Sag Harbor. Harbor Frost features ice sculptures, live music, and a fireworks display over the harbor. Head to Long Wharf and Main Street Saturday afternoon. And be prepared to be amazed. Michael Carbonaro brings his new reality twisting magic show to the Paramount. That's Saturday night at 7:30.
Tendrás en un cuaderno una ecuación y chantajes para armar tu melodrama.
Guatemalan singer-songwriter Ricardo Arjona heads to the island. His new tour makes a stop at UBS Arena Saturday night at 8 o'clock. For admission information and more events, click Get More below the Newsday TV video box on our homepage. See more on these stories on Newsday.com and watch us streaming anytime on Local Now, YouTube, and the other streaming services you see here. I'm Macy Eglund. We've got more local news coming up.
Newsday investigates the story of 2 brothers brought to the U.S. as children who were deported by ICE last May with no criminal record. From Long Island to El Salvador, desperate to return to their American lives. Deported, now available at Newsday.com.